You wake before dawn, the city still soft around the edges, and there is a gentle insistence at the back of you, not loud, not angry, just patient, like a hand on your shoulder. Steam rises from your coffee as you sift through emails, the same steady rhythm of work and care, bills paid, promises kept. You are diligent and hopeful, you are proud of your restraint. Yet beneath the ordinary, a whisper threads through the day, are you ready for more? It is not a question meant to shame, but to stir, an invitation tucked into the noise of tasks and loyalties. In the kitchen your partner smiles and says, we should be careful, and you nod because caution has been your virtue. At the office you decline a project, citing humility, and walk away with a small, secret relief. At church a well-meaning friend praises your sacrifice, calling loyalty a crown. Each voice feels like truth until you notice the pattern, a ceiling you never questioned, built brick by careful brick from fear wearing the clothes of duty. The message keeps returning in odd places, a line in a hymn that lands like a stone in your gut, a stray conversation with a neighbor who speaks of a dream paused, a child's innocent question, why don't you try? It pierces through routines and invites you to see fear wearing disguises, humility that smalls your light, loyalty that keeps you in the narrow, responsibility that has become an excuse for a smaller life. The tone is tender, never condemning, you are not being scolded, you are being called. You feel the tug between gratitude and a restless hunger that feels almost like longing for permission. The still, small voice does not demand a leap, it sets a hand on the scale and asks you to weigh possibility with honesty. If this calling lands on you tonight, if it wakes you in the quiet, give this message a moment of affirmation, like it, subscribe, and click the bell so these gentle summons can find you when they return. Stay with me, we will follow that whisper deeper, and the next step will ask you to meet the shadow that has sheltered your limits. The morning light slices through kitchen blinds and lands on a stack of unopened envelopes, bills, opportunities, invitations folded into the same paper. You sit, coffee cooling, fingers hovering, and for a moment the world tilts between two truths, the life you know and the life that keeps nudging at your edges. A voice, not loud but insistently clear, threads through the ordinary clutter, are you ready for more? It is not accusation, it is an invitation that unsettles you like a song you half remember. You answer with polite refusals, I'm thankful, I'm responsible, I can't right now, and each excuse feels like a stitch sewn into a ceiling you have learned to never peek above. Outside, the city hums with people who seem to have permission to widen their hands and take. Inside, your permission has always been conditional. You remember the faces, your parents' steady worry, a mentor's praise for practical restraint, a prayer taught in a small, earnest room that framed abundance as vanity. Those good words became rails that keep you safe from risk, and somewhere safety ossified into scarcity. A whisper shifts into a parable, a farmer who buried seed to keep it safe, only to find the soil barren. It lands heavy because the parable lives in you. You realize your caution has cost you fertile ground. A gentle presence sits across the table, no fanfare, just a pair of eyes that know the tally of your small sacrifices and the ledger of your hidden longings. Fear has learned to speak like duty, the presence says. It wears humility like armor. The words are medicine and mirror. You see how generosity was rationed, how opportunities were reframed as distractions, how service to others became an excuse to deny yourself a margin to grow. Memories unspool, a plan abandoned for the sake of convenience, a dream postponed out of loyalty, a voice silenced by the terror of becoming more than expected. You realize self-sabotage is not always dramatic, often it's a careful architecture of excuses that preserves a comfortable ceiling. That recognition is tender and terrible at once. The presence leans forward, the tone shifting from observation to counsel. What you call restraint might be a habit of scarcity, and habits can be retaught. Stay with this, soon you will be invited to name the first walls and learn how to start dismantling them, one faithful step at a time. You sit at the kitchen table long after the plates are cleared, a single lamp casting a warm circle on unpaid bills and a notebook filled with half-formed plans. The house is quiet except for the soft, insistent tapping of a calendar reminder on your phone, an invitation you never opened. A voice, at first indistinct, moves through the room like wind through trees. Are you ready for more? It feels like a question from somewhere beyond strategy or hustle, And yet you find yourself answering with familiar defenses, not now. I need to be responsible. I can't risk the family's comfort. The words are true and also a mask. Fear has learned to speak the language of duty. Across town, a woman in a coffee shop rehearses the same small refusals. She underprices her work, citing humility. When a mentor offers a collaboration that could double her reach, she smiles and says, "I'll pass, someone else should get the chance." The conversation that follows is quieter, a whisper that sounds like a sermon. Why do you shrink when you could expand? Her hands tighten around her cup. Shame and loyalty fold together until scarcity feels like virtue. A guide appears, not as accusation but as clarity. He sits beside you on the porch steps or across from her at the cafe, eyes steady. Fear wears many robes, he says. Sometimes it is modesty. Sometimes it is fidelity to a ceiling you learn to admire. He tells a parable. A farmer keeps seeds in a locked chest out of worry they might be scarce next season. Another farmer plants generously, and the harvest feeds a village for years. Which farmer carries God's hunger? The guide asks. The answer lands like sunlight, simple and uncomfortable. Prophetic whispers thread through ordinary moments. A voicemail you almost delete says, "Take the room they told you were unworthy of." An email flag rises, and instead of deleting, you breathe and open. You begin to see the cost of staying small, the projects never launched, the gifts never given, the people who could have been served if only you had received. There is tenderness but also urgency, continuing to mistake humility for scarcity compounds injustice. If this stirs something in you, know there is practical help ahead, tools to untangle faith from fear, steps to steward abundance. If this message touches you, press like as an act of courage, subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next guiding word. Ahead, you will be invited to accept prosperity not as indulgence but as vocation, and the first concrete step waits just beyond this moment. You sit at the kitchen table with the light of the evening lamp drawing a small island on the clutter of invoices and notebooks. Outside, the city breathes indifferent traffic, inside, a quieter storm. A memory arrives unbidden, a father counting coins with a careful reverence, a mother turning down an opportunity because we don't ask for more. The voice that's been knocking since Act I slips into the room again, not loud, but precise. Who taught you to fear abundance? You answer with the same polite defenses you've rehearsed all your life: humility, duty, loyalty, words that have soft edges but lock the door to expansion. A figure appears in the doorway, not demanding, just luminous. You don't know whether this is a dream, a prayer, or the clearest part of yourself. You have been protecting a version of safety that keeps you small, the guide says, and the sentence lands like a bell. You find yourself listing the ways you self-sabotage, hesitating when a client offers more, explaining away your gifts, giving until you are empty because scarcity taught you that scarcity is virtue. The guide walks slowly among the papers, picks up a cancelled check like a relic. Scarcity has become a spiritual habit, they whisper. You worship the shortage as proof of your worthiness. The room shifts into scenes, conversations where your no sounded pious, late nights when exhaustion masqueraded as sacrifice, a tattered ceiling you keep painting to look like a sky. You see what you once could not. Every time you declined a better offer, every time you said it's not for me, you anchored a ceiling over your own life. The cost is intimate, a muted joy, relationships frayed by quiet resentment, a calling dulled by fear. You are not betraying your values by receiving, the guide says, gentle but urgent. Prosperity can amplify your service, scarcity cannot. You feel the resistance, the old loyalties rising like a fever. The guide offers a parable, a lamp meant to brighten a house hidden under a basket. What would happen if you lifted the basket, they ask. The image is simple and impossible to ignore. If that image resonated, take a breath with it, this is the turning point. If this touched you, let it settle, and if you want the next practical steps and prayers to lift the basket, like what you felt, subscribe, and ring the bell, because in the next moment we begin the work of receiving intentionally, with strategy and faith. The room is small but warm, late afternoon light slanting through blinds and catching dust like a constellation. You sit across from the guide, an unassuming presence whose eyes hold the patience of someone who has watched many wrestle with the same invisible ceiling. Outside, the city hums with ordinary commerce, but inside the silence is a different kind of noise, memories, obligations, the steady rhythm of not yet. The guide leans forward, voice low and plain as a lantern's glow. Tell me about the promises you keep to others that you never keep to yourself. You name them: loyalty to a past identity, duty that comforts in its limits, humility that feels safer than risk. As you speak, the room changes, walls become a theater of small, repeating scenes, a young version of you turning down an opportunity to avoid envy, a quieter self shrinking a voice so others would not feel exposed, a familiar hand pulling back plans that felt daring. Each vignette is simple, ordinary sabotage rendered incandescent. The guide does not chastise. Instead there are parables: a woman who buried her seeds because the soil looked poor, only to wake decades later to find a barren patch where a grove could have been. A lamp placed under a crate when rain threatened, later she wondered why the road stayed dark. You've mistaken caution for virtue, the guide says, almost tender. Fear learned language and now speaks as responsibility. For a moment the air thickens with the gravity of all those small refusals, jobs left undone, words unsaid, gifts withheld. A whisper threads through the room, like wine through leaves: messages from God do not arrive to shame you, they arrive to reroute you. You feel both defense and a dawning grief, grief for the gifts deferred and a curious, bright anger at the injustice of self-denial. Then a different image arrives, a ledger not of scarcity but of stewardship, columns of intended impact, resources for growing what matters. The map is simple: notice the fear, name its lie, reassign the resources. The guide sketches one practical cadence, tiny faithful steps that stretch capacity without grand risk, and you sense possibility knitting itself into your bones. If this reaches you, let that feeling land, like this message, as an act of affirmation. Subscribe and ring the bell to receive the next word that will turn intention into action. In the next moment you will be asked to decide which first step you will take, and why refusing it will finally cost you more than you can afford. You sit at the kitchen table again, the same mug, the same stack of bills, but the light is different, slanting gold through the blinds like an invitation. The whisper comes not as thunder but as a clear, scandalous question: who told you abundance was sinful? You hear it and your throat tightens. An old answer rises: humility, duty, loyalty. I must not want more, you murmur, but the room seems to wait. A gentle voice, neither condemning nor cajoling, leans close and says, that answer is borrowed fear. A memory flashes: you refusing a raise because accepting felt like leaving someone behind, you pricing your gift lower than its worth so no one would call you greedy, you saying yes until your own heart whispered no. The guide in the doorway sits on the counter, light pooling around them, and recounts a parable of a servant who buried his talent not out of indifference but out of devotion to being small. He thought hiding was humility, the guide says. But humility that hides gifts is vanity disguised. You feel the thin thread of self-sabotage, excuses like comfort food that dulls the ache of risk. The whisper returns, tender and relentless: scarcity has rhythm in your bones because you practiced it. Each excuse tightened the ceiling until it fit like a lid. Now the same voice asks you to look: what have you not done because you feared being too seen? Whom have you kept from blessing because you believed you did not deserve greater provision? A scene shifts. A child hands you a crayon drawing of a house with open windows. Let it in, the guide says. Prosperity is a window, not a wall. In that small exchange you taste a larger truth: provision enables purpose, abundance expands the circle of care. The cost of denying your capacity is visible: muted music, missed opportunities, relationships squeezed by constraint. If these words land like a hand on your shoulder, return that breath. Like this message as an act of agreement, an emotional yes that you are willing to be retaught. Subscribe and ring the bell to walk this path together, so each message can find you when the next invitation comes. Ahead, you will learn how to translate invitation into action, practical steps that honor God, multiply resources, and free you to steward what you were made to hold. You sit at the kitchen table as dawn slips through blinds, a mug cooling in your hands, and the silence around you suddenly full of questions. A tender voice, neither loud nor accusatory, asks, "What roof do you protect that keeps you from building the house you were meant to live in?" It feels like a conversation with someone who has watched you choose safe paths before, a parent, a pastor, God. You answer with practiced humility, "I want to be responsible," and the voice returns, patient and precise, "Responsibility is not the same as limitation." The scene widens, a ledger of unpaid dreams, a drawer of half-finished plans, a child's drawing taped to a wall that imagines a bright, impossible future. In the midst of these ordinary artifacts, you see how fear has dressed itself in noble fabrics, duty, loyalty, prudence, each stitch a reason to stay small. A guide appears, not as a sermon but as a mirror, recounting a subtle parable. 2 seed packets are offered, one planted in a cracked pot, sheltered from wind and risk, the other sown in open soil where storms might come. Both seeds wanted to grow, the guide says, but one bent its branches to avoid breaking and never learned to reach. You feel the sting of recognition. There are conversations you've avoided, about money, calling, the real size of your gifts. There are bargains struck in the dark, "I will be humble, I will be practical, I will not outshine, I will not ask for more." Each bargain has a cost, relationships watered with worry, opportunities deferred, faith turned into scarcity-sized prayers. The voice leans in, neither condemning nor excusing, "Scantness has become a habit." Break the ritual, and you break the fear. A prophetic whisper offers a different image, abundance as stewardship, prosperity as a tool for purpose. You imagine resources moving, not hoarded but multiplied, the ledger rewritten with audacity and generosity. The air lifts, a possibility opens like a door that has been unlocked from the inside. If this stirring touches you, stay with it, come back to this place of quiet courage. Like what you feel, subscribe to receive the next step, and ring the bell, because next we will turn revelation into the first practical act that breaks the ceiling and welcomes more. The room holds a hush like the moment before a tide turns. Morning light slides across the table where you sit with a notebook still half empty, the ink a quiet witness to half-made promises. The guide leans back in a chair that has seen many questions and answers, his voice is soft but certain. "Fear learned to wear your virtues," he says, watching the steam curl from your cup. It wrapped itself in duty, loyalty, humility, so you wouldn't notice it was keeping your hands tied. You remember the small concessions, saying yes when your heart whispered no, shelving dreams to keep a surface peace, measuring worth by what you could deny yourself. Each memory is a weight you can now name. Outside, a neighbor's laughter, a dog barking, the ordinary world continuing as though nothing had shifted. Inside, the guide offers a parable, an orchard tended by someone who feared abundance. He watered only the saplings that looked safe, kept the best trees pruned back so they wouldn't overshadow the rest. His harvest was enough to survive, but never to give. Prosperity, the guide says, is not a storm to hide from, it is sun for the orchard. If you hoard the light, you starve the fruit. You feel the truth like a pressure under the ribs. A practical blueprint appears in the conversation. Begin with a simple inventory, resources, debts, gifts, and urgings. Make 3 small commitments you can keep this month, 1 to increase your capacity to receive, 1 to give with intention, 1 to learn a skill that multiplies. The assignments are concrete but tender, like stitches mending a torn hem. Courage, he advises, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs the checks, opens the doors, asks for help. When the guide rests a hand lightly on the notebook, you sense a promise. The next steps will not be grand illusions but steady practices that honor both faith and strategy. If this moment has shifted something in you, let it settle by staying with the message, like it as a sign that you're choosing more. Subscribe to follow the rest of the path, and ring the bell to receive the next whisper when it comes. Beyond the window, a path through the orchard leads downhill, and the guide's final words point you toward it. The work of receiving begins at the first step, and the next teaching awaits just beyond the bend. You sit at the kitchen table as dawn loosens the night from the curtains. A ledger lies open, numbers like old prayers, some hopeful, some shame-laden. The whisper comes again, not as accusation but as a hand on your shoulder. Are you willing to steward what you have, to let abundance be a tool for the life you were made to live? You look up, startled to find the room somehow larger, the air less tight around your ribs. Fear, which once felt like fidelity to modesty, begins to unlace. In the next hour you begin small, practical work. You name your gifts aloud: creativity, discipline, a capacity to connect, and you map them to needs you see in the world. The act of naming changes the thing. It moves possibility from the realm of wish into the realm of strategy. A neighbor's failed business becomes a classroom for what not to repeat. You make a list that is both financial and moral: pay debts that suffocate, set aside a margin for generosity, budget for learning, and assign a monthly amount to investment in your purpose. Each line feels like a covenant, not with scarcity but with intention. The quiet voice returns, this time with a parable. A woman planted seeds in both barren and fertile soil. The difference wasn't luck but care. You recognize yourself in her, not merely a recipient of gifts, but a gardener of provision. Courage here is simple: an email asking for mentorship, a conversation about pricing that used to feel selfish, a small reallocation of time toward the project that matters. You practice saying, "I will receive this so I can give more," and the sentence bends the old story of unworthiness. There is resistance, old loyalties, the fear you'll change into someone unrecognizable, but compassion steadies you. Prosperity, you understand, is not a trophy, it is a language of stewardship, a call to expand your capacity to love through resources. If this turning resonates with you, let that feeling land. Like to honor the shift, subscribe to walk this path together, and ring the bell to be reminded when the next step arrives. Ahead, the guide will give you a clear map, specific actions to multiply what you have, with integrity and courage. The morning light slides through half-open blinds and paints the kitchen table in thin gold lines. You are sitting there, fingers around a mug gone cold, replaying the same gentle question: are you ready for more? The voice that has visited you in small, uncanny ways, on crowded buses, in quiet prayers, in the sudden clarity between tasks, returns now with a steadier cadence. It is not dramatic, it is a patient teacher reminding you that every small refusal built the ceiling you live under. A memory of a promise you made to someone long ago surfaces: we'll be careful, we'll be enough. The room tightens around that promise until it feels like a limit, not a covenant. Across the table, the wise guide leans forward, palms open, eyes steady. Fear dressed itself as humility because humility felt safer, they say. Loyalty disguised scarcity, duty became the fence. You hear the truth as if it were a favorite hymn slightly out of tune, familiar and unsettling. The guide lets a story unfold: a farmer who refused the richer soil because the old patch fed the village no matter how meagerly. Years later, the village still ate, but there were fewer hands to help. The cost of refusing abundance, the guide whispers, is not only comfort lost, it is the diminished capacity to serve. You imagine your gifts as seeds. Some were sown and watered, others were kept in pockets, fearful of the wind. In the silence between the guide sentences you feel a small, fierce permission settle inside you: prosperity can be a tool. It can multiply what you were given and widen the circle. This is not about selfishness, it is stewardship. The heart, which once equated gaining with guilt, begins to learn a new grammar: receive, steward, give. The city hum returns, and with it practical images, a ledger rebalanced, a conversation about payment with dignity, resources aligned with calling. You see the first brave steps: setting aside, asking for fair pay, saying yes to investment in your craft. It is both spiritual and tactical, a faith that functions like an account being opened. If this moment reached you, hold it. Like this message as an act of affirmation, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss the final benediction, a clear map for stewarding what arrives, and the courage to receive it. The next act will gather every strand we've touched and lay out how to stand in abundance without shame. You stand in the soft light of morning, the paper of your life spread before you like a map: small debts, bigger dreams, the familiar edges of habit. A quiet voice you have begun to recognize, God's voice, or the truest part of you, leans in and asks again, gently, are you ready for more? You feel the old tremor of fear, that instinct to shrink, but something else rises, a steady, practical courage that steadies your hands and opens the ledger not in shame but in curiosity. This is not about getting rich for vanity, the voice says. This is about stewarding what you were given so more can be given. You answer aloud, fumbling and brave, "Show me how." The reply arrives not as thunder but as room for action. Name the fear, name the numbers, forget the small mistakes, and commit to one measurable step today. Open a simple account for growth. Schedule an hour to learn. Say yes to counsel. Give a small portion to bless someone else. These are the sacramental acts of prosperity: clarity, discipline, generosity. You can feel the pattern loosening, the old habit of scarcity unhooking from your identity. Prosperity shifts from being a threat to becoming a tool. It can expand your capacity to love, to serve, to create lasting good. Stewardship becomes prayer in motion, budgets offered like vows, investments tended like gardens, earnings shared like rain. Fear still checks in sometimes. Greet it, name it, and keep walking. Before you go into the day, receive this benediction: may your resources reflect your values, may your courage outpace your doubts, and may every gift you receive be multiplied in service. If this message touched something inside you, press like to mark the moment you chose courage. Subscribe and tap the bell so these invitations keep finding you: practical steps, gentle prophecies, and tools to steward what's coming. Take one small, faithful action today. When you do, listen, God will already be preparing the next invitation.